Hi, my name is Liz Schlemer, and this is a video for IME 443 Facilities Planning and Design at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. This particular video is on space requirements. So, as always, we're hoping to do excellent engineering within a particular context. Excellent engineering includes quantitative methods and systematic approaches, and the context includes the project or the company, but also considering social, environmental concerns and political and cultural also. So these are the topics in facilities planning, and we're looking at layout design in this particular video. We're also in the step 4 in the systematic approach, which is determining space requirements. Now in space requirements, we're going to be looking at sort of a bottom-up approach where we first look at the workstation specifications, then we go to the department specifications, and then we look at the aisle arrangements, which looks at between departments or total facility design. In space requirements, we have to always be careful of what's called Parkinson's law, which is things expand to fill space. And this is sort of like nature abhors a vacuum, but the way it works in facilities design is that you want to make sure that if you see a particular area and it's all filled up with something, it might just mean that nothing else was there, so it filled up. It might actually not mean that you need that particular space. So when we're looking at space requirements in this systematic or bottom-up approach, we'll start with workstation specifications. In the workstations, we're going to look at equipment, material, and personnel when we're deciding how much space is necessary. So for the equipment, we're going to be looking at what is the footprint of the equipment, but not only the footprint, what kind of machine travel is necessary. So for instance, if it's a robot, the particular footprint is quite small, but it might actually be moving around quite a bit, and you want to consider that total travel area as the footprint necessary for the equipment. You also want to consider tables and desks and tool chests, so anything else that might be needed in order to work in this particular area. Whoops. You also want to be concerned about machine maintenance, so you can't have machines right up against the wall. You want to make sure you include space so that somebody can come in there and service the machine and do that easily. And the last thing in the area of equipment is you want to be concerned about the plant services. So is there electricity? Is there any kind of water or compressed air that's necessary for a particular machine? This all needs to be planned for, and space needs to be allocated for it. In the area of material, so not only are we going to be working on a particular part, but there's also often going to be parts waiting to be worked on, this work in process kind of materials. And if it's a single piece flow, then it's just the size of one particular piece of part. But if it's a batch, you need to consider that this might need quite a bit of space if it's a large batch of materials that you're processing. You also want to be considering of the material itself that you're working on the workbench. So the size of the material, but not only that, are there any kind of parts that you're putting onto, parts or fasteners or anything that you're putting onto the process, onto the material, onto the part as you're processing it. You want to consider that you might have bins for that. And the next thing is you also might consider there might be some waste or scrap associated with a particular process. Maybe you're cutting away material. Maybe there's a packaging associated with a part that you need to discard in a waste basket or in a recycling receptacle. And then the last thing associated with materials are tools, fixtures, and dies. So anything that you need in order to help you do this process. So tools like hammers or screwdrivers, you need to make sure you have a space for that. But fixtures and dies are things that often are used in a manufacturing process. And depending on how big the part is and how many different parts are processed in a facility, the storage of these fixtures and dies can be quite extensive, and you need quite a bit of space for it. So in the area of personnel, you need to consider there needs to be a space for the operator, and what are they standing, are they sitting, are they in an unusual position that you need to consider. There also needs to be a place for material handling equipment, whether it's a cart or a forklift. You need to have room for that to maneuver and room for the operator to maneuver it. Also, having a place for the operator to get in and out of the particular area, you need to consider where that is. So once you've done that, you need to think about in the department, are there any centralized services associated with the department? Do you have a quality control station that everybody moves to? Do you have a place where you have specialized equipment that you need to allocate space for? And once you've done that, then you need to determine how many workstations you need for each department. And the next video, we're going to talk about how to do that calculation about how many workstations are needed in a department. But once you've done that, then you sum all the workstations together, and then you add an aisle requirement. Now, ultimately, you're going to be laying out the particular workstation, all the workspaces within the facility. But before you do that, you want to have an idea of how much space is necessary for the department. So you often start by adding an aisle allowance. And the aisle allowance is dependent on how big the load is, or the part, or the batch that you're processing. So if the load is less than 6 square feet, you only add about 5 or 10% for aisle allowances. But if the load is quite large, 18 square feet, then you might add as much as 40% for aisle allowances. Now, the next level is that once you have the workstations and then you have the departments with the aisles in it, you need to consider the flow between departments. And this happens in aisles that travel throughout the facility. So you need to understand the flow, or the length of all these aisles, and also the width of them. Now, the flow is, we talked about flow in the previous video when we talked about relationships between departments. And if you remember that often the flow goes from shipping to receiving in a well-designed facility. So you have sort of a general idea how flow is going to be through the facility. And then all you need to then concern with is how wide should those aisles be. And those aisles the width of the aisle is dependent on the material handling equipment. In this case, you can see a tractor is required a 12-foot aisle, where a person walking is only a 3-foot aisle. So that'll help you then decide how much allocation for the aisles between departments. So once you have all the workstations and however many you need, you add an allowance associated with the aisles within the department, and then you add aisles between the department. You have allowances, and that should get you the total space required in the facility.